I promised you that we would use some simple ingredients like silicone and cornstarch to make some concrete stamps, so let me show you how to do that now. Let's first start by showing you the ingredients and all the materials that we need. You definitely want gloves for this. You will need 100% silicone. Now, you don't want to get like latex caulking with silicone added. You need 100% silicone. And you don't have to have one of these things to get it out, but I find that it's neater than and less dangerous. I nearly cut myself one time trying to split this with a razor knife. So if you have a caulking gun, that's the safest way to get it out. You'll want some kind of talcum powder or baby powder. You're going to need cornstarch. And I keep some spray, like olive oil or some kind of cooking spray, just the cheap kind. Sometimes I'll need to mist my gloves with it a little bit, or on some surfaces, this is what I'll put down before I start putting the material on. I have some plastic wrap stretched across here, and I have it taped in place so it's not moving around while we are trying to work. And you know, if you've never used a caulk gun before, this one doesn't have it. Sometimes they'll have a little hinged spike that you can use to puncture. There's a seal inside this. But I'm going to go ahead and cut it off down at the base because we're just going to squirt it all out at once. Maybe. Here we go. And then I don't know if you can see, but there's a foil seal down in there. And this doesn't have one of those little spiky things on it, so I'm just going to use a kebab skewer. The bamboo kind, so I can just pitch it when I'm done with it. And I make a few holes because we don't want to be waiting forever for all this to come out. All right, now I'm going to put my gloves on, and we're going to start with a rock. So I'm going to dust a little powder on here. Old makeup brush just to kind of move it around on here. All right, now there are all different ratios that you can use cornstarch to the silicone depending on what you want. Each one of these standard tubes that fit in a standard caulking gun hold about 1.5 cups of material. So if you do a 1-to-1, you're going to use 1.5 cups of cornstarch to a full tube. Now, if you want more detail, you can use a full tube with about 3/4 to a cup of cornstarch. If you want something that's going to be really thick and not spread very much, which we're going to do in a minute. I'll show you how we would use that. But it doesn't give you very much working time. Then you could use like 2 cups of cornstarch to this 1.5 cup tube. Is that making sense? So we're going to start off, each one of these bowls has 1.5 cups. It has the same volume as one of these tubes. So I'm going to spread it out on my plastic. I'm going to put about half of it in. And we're going to see how it goes. And I'm just going to start squirting it out. You just want to make sure that you keep the silicone landing on the cornstarch. Okay, let's stop right there and see how much we're going to end up with. I'm going to sprinkle a little more of this cornstarch on top, because we don't want to put our gloves in the silicone that doesn't have some cornstarch in it or on it. And you just start doing this. You start incorporating that cornstarch into the silicone. Okay. You want to keep the silicone all together so you don't lose track of it. We're going to squirt some more on there. We've got about 2/3 of the tube probably out already. This is the strangest feeling concoction when you work with it. Well, see there, I got into some that didn't have any cornstarch incorporated into it, and it started stringing. Okay, let's pick it up out of here, feel through this to make sure we haven't missed some strings I'm going to want to waste. Now, you can add a little glycerin to this, about maybe like a tablespoon or tablespoon and a half to this volume, and it makes it flow more smoothly, gives you a little more working time. And actually, I think probably makes them last a little longer because they don't get brittle. It keeps them more supple. Oh, there's a piece there. And of course, if you have leftover cornstarch, throw it away. You don't want to put it back in the container. Just keep working it in until you know that you have your cornstarch and your silicone mixed very well in. And this smells really bad. You want to do this by an open window, or even outside is best, or in your garage or something, because it smells awful. Now, you don't want to fuss with it too long, or you risk running out of time. So I'm going to tear this apart here. Work a little more back in to where we get those exposed edges of the silicone. And I picked a rock just out of my landscaping that has some nice texture. And just going to smush it, kind of hold it in place. Okay, I don't have quite enough in it, so let me... So you can see how it stuck to my palm. Probably using your palm is not the best way to go, because this is it really is kind of a delicate material at this stage. And don't worry that your outside edges are irregular. That actually, I think, gives you a more realistic stamp when you go to stamp on your cement, because you don't have straight edges. And then I'm just going to take my fingertips and work this out. This is a little thin out here. And I'm going to put just a little bit of the silicone here. And then bury it in another layer of cornstarch. Now, I'm not putting really any pressure other than just a pat. And I look around, and it looks like I'm a little thin on this side over here, because you want it to have enough thickness to hold together. Pick up any scraps of silicone that have wandered around and just press those gently in there to build up that corner a little bit. Now, the higher the ratio of cornstarch to silicone, probably it reduces the longevity of it, especially since we'll be getting it wet, using it with something caustic like raw concrete or raw cement. Okay, we're just going to set that aside and leave it alone for about an hour. All right, we've got a little bit left here, and it's setting up. So we're going to bring our rock over here. See which side do we like. We like this side. And I'm going to go ahead and spray this one with a little of the cooking oil. If you should want tree bark, I always use cooking oil. For one thing, I don't want to put any kind of chemicals on a tree. I figure something that's food safe like that is going to be relatively harmless. I just spray it right on the tree bark and press this material into it. Also, if you have some barn wood or some kind of rugged wood or something that you want to make a stamp out of, I would say the oil works better on wood than just trying to use talcum powder. And this is coming apart already. I'm going to give it a little bit of a knead. I don't know, you can see how it starts coming back together. So you have a couple of minutes. And you don't have to do like the entire rock. Sometimes it's nice to have some small stamps. I need to powder my glove. It's trying to stick to my glove instead of the rock. So you can see here are some old ones. I mean, these are old. And they have survived being left in water. This was probably a tube, and I made it a little thinner so I was able to spread it out a little farther. Okay, I'm gonna try. This has just been sitting here this couple of minutes. Let's see if we can just go ahead and take this one off. We're just gonna see if the gravity will work with this. I'm easing the edges loose and then peel back. And it's really impossible to see. It's just a very, very simple texture, but it would look good on cement. All right, I still have all this here. I only used about a cup of the last bowl. So that one was a little bit, that was probably like 3/4, 1 part silicone to 3/4 parts cornstarch. This one we're going to make a little more cornstarch because I'm going to show you how to do the little lion head that's on the keystone on the fireplace. I have another rubber stamp or rubber mold that I made from one of these lions, and I can't find it anywhere. As soon as I finish this video and get it posted, I'll find it, of course. But we're going to try to make one from this recipe. And this one is going to have lots of cornstarch to silicone, but I'm going to have to open that other container. Do you believe? I mean, it's nice to have a bunch of different stamps with different textures, especially when you're trying to create a variety of stones. You don't want to sit back and see the same pattern repeated just over and over and over, or I don't anyway. And this really smells awful. I'm going to stick with just this tube because I think this might be enough to do our little lion. And when I first started making these little molds and forms, a tube of this was about $3.50 or $4. This is $9 now. So I'm not as experimental with them as I used to be. Put a little cornstarch on there. Just gently turn it over, working it in. Now I want a lot of cornstarch in this because we want it to hold its form. Because this is going to be we're just trying to get the surface texture to transfer to another surface. This lion head, we're actually going to be doing a dimensional mold. So it's going to have to hold itself together and still have some flexibility to get it apart. I think this might be where glycerin would come in handy. I thought I had some, but I think when I did a big clean out in the pantry, and I think I threw it away then. So if you have something like that, glycerin, if you make lotion or soap or something like that, and you have something that gets out of date, this is a great way to use it up in projects like this. I'm kind of squishing it hard. I can hear kind of pops going in there where the air pockets are happening. And now I'm going to smush it out a little bit, sprinkle some more cornstarch to work more cornstarch into it. And you just want to I don't know, you'll get a feel for it when you're doing it, when you start getting too much cornstarch in it. It'll start getting kind of crumbly and not want to hold together. When you start that, then just stop adding cornstarch for a minute and knead it. I'm looking for any. Okay, that feels pretty. I'm gonna need a little more. When you take it in your hand and smash it, if it cracks too much around the edges, you probably want to knead it just a little more to distribute the silicone and cornstarch more uniformly. And I sort of have to relearn this every time I do it because it's not something that you just do every day. Okay, that looks like that's going to be about the right amount. And I'm going to spray this with a cooking spray. It has a lot of details in it, the lion's mane, eyes, teeth. So I want to make sure that it really gets in there. Clear a little bit of a spot here. Okay, now I'm just going to press till it goes down to meet this tabletop here. And then I'm just going to take my whole hand and I want to press hard enough that the details are transferred, but I don't want to smush it so hard that like more prominent areas like the nose get too thin. I want to make sure that that stays a nice, thick, sturdy mold because we're going to be pouring concrete into it and then we're going to have to flex it to get it out. So I'd like this to be reusable and not a one and done situation. This will be maybe 24 hours before I'm comfortable using it. So I'll be able to take the mold off the lion before then, but I'll still let it sit for that length of time so that it cures all the way through. Okay, so I'm actually just going to leave this here. I'll shop back up all my mess. So we did this one, this little one, and this mold for this lion's head out of one tube and about a third of a cup of, or a third of a container of cornstarch. So less than $10. I got one small-ish, one small, and one mold. So as materials go, as tools, specialty tools go, I think that's a pretty good price. It's been an hour. So let's try to pull this off. Okay, actually I had already pulled it off to test, and that's a really nice texture. You can combine a texture like this that's really low profile with another one next to it. So I will take scissors and I will cut this off because I wasn't paying enough attention and I wrapped that around, and that will get in your way more than it will help you. So I will trim that off, and these are easy to cut with scissors. Okay, here's the big question. Let's see if our lion worked out, and I have not tested this. Okay, so I've got it. I didn't do a very good job of keeping it even. See, it's very, very thin on this side and much thicker on the other side. So I'm a little worried about whether or not that will hold as we take our molded material in and out. But let's see what happens. Just gently, don't get in any hurry for any part of it to release. This has a little handle, so let's see if I can pull. Ah, it did. Oh, that's fantastic. I'll do a close-up on it. But yeah, that worked out great. But now I am going to let this sit overnight, and then tomorrow I will show you how I molded a lion's head and put it on a keystone. Okay, I'm going to show you how I put the lion face on the keystone on the center of the fireplace. And I put up just a little demo situation here with our little practice wall and sort of a keystone shape. And I'm going to use the olive oil spray or the cooking oil spray. I feel like I prefer this to a commercial cement release if I'm doing anything dimensional, especially when you have a lot of details like this lion's face has. And I am going to stop talking now and I'm going to voice over and edit because I have a terrible case of allergies today and I'll be sneezing about every 5 seconds or blowing my nose, and nobody wants to see that. So I'll just demonstrate and then I'll add the narration later on. Okay, after you have sprayed whatever release medium you decide to use, you want to make sure that it's thoroughly saturated and all the interior areas are covered, but you don't want it pooling. So go ahead and give it a good spray and then turn it upside down and shake it to so that any excess runs out. Now I'm using just using my hands to press the mix in. This is the same mix we used to make the vertical concrete stones. I've just mixed it a bit thicker, so it's more of a pressing into the mold action rather than a pour. And I just make sure that I fill in all the gaps. Now I just remove, after I keep pressing and making sure there are no air pockets in there, I will then start removing a little bit to make sure that we don't have a convex back, so to make sure that we don't have a curved shape that would keep it from being flat, to make good contact with that keystone. Okay, now I'm taking a damp rag and I'm just getting the excess to make sure that that way you can look at the edges, make sure your edge is clean, and to make sure that you don't have any gaps around the edges that you need to fill in. Then you just set it down. You just set it and forget it. All right, I'm going to try to talk through this one. We'll see if I can get by without a lot of sneezing. I've taken just a little bit of our mix and I've put some out on a hawk. You can use a paper plate. You can use a piece of plywood, scrap plywood, just anything where you can put some of this out. And I make kind of a well in the center. I'm just going to add quite a bit of this is 50-50 water and bonding agent, and we're going to make a slurry. And you can do this with just the dry mix and water and bonding agent. I just made way too much, so I'm going to use some of this up. And you want to get it really, really loose. Loosey-goosey. You can see it's not runny, but it's a very thin paste, kind of like, I don't know how to compare it. Maybe like a cheese sauce. That kind of, it would pour if you had it in a container and tried to pour it, but it's not running all over the place. Okay, now we're going to take, of course we have to, oh wait, first I'm going to dampen our keystone. And while it was still wet, I drove a couple of screws in through the concrete that go into the drywall behind it. And that just creates something to help this hang on as it's curing. You just want to make sure you don't leave the screws extended out so much that they interfere with the surface. They come through to the surface of whatever design you're putting on. Okay, ever trusty chip brush. Just gonna kind of smoosh it on there. We want it pretty thick all around the area. You don't have to be very precise. We're gonna wipe away any excess when we get it in place. Okay, and then we're gonna do the same thing on the back. I'm just gonna scrape it off onto that. Wet concrete. You remember when I was trying to trowel on the cement mix and it kept sticking to my trowel because there was wet cement on the trowel? So wet cement will stick to wet cement. So that's the logic to this. And maybe spray just a little more on there. Just don't want to get it soupy. Okay, now I don't remember which side was up. Okay, there's a little thing. when you make a mold like this where you can't see, this is funny. Don't remember which side is up. Okay, this side is down. All right, so we're just going to try to, I'm going to put a little more on here. Little more. Just going to knead it in my hand, get it all yucky and wet, where it would be a little too wet to use. And we'll make a little well out of this that roughly fits it. Everybody, I mean, you'll find your own way of doing this. This is kind of what I have found. All right, let her rip, tater chip, and just smush it on there. Now, another problem with this mold is it's not centered. So when I made it, remember I told you I didn't pay enough attention to getting the perimeter even. So I'm having to just try to guess whether I have this centered. One way you could, what I should have done was, before I put the cement in, mark it down the back, just put a Sharpie line to tell me where the center line is. Now I'm just kind of guessing, but then I'm going to bend this, and I'm going to start pulling this slowly away. He's on there at about 11 o'clock. Yeah, we don't want that. So as a demonstration of how forgiving this stuff is, we're just going to smush it off. We're just going to smush it off. I'm going to take it out, and I'm just going to smush it back in there. And one thing I noticed is that this keystone is a bit thin right here, which is, you want to make sure when you form your whatever stone you're going to put something like this on, make sure you get it fairly level. I got it thicker on this side so it slopes away from our casting just a little bit on that side. So I'm going to add a little, that's way too much. I'm going to add just a little thickness on that side. All right, so this has the cement here, our keystone has already pulled most of the moisture out of what we put on. So we're going to add some more. Going to add some more here. And make sure that our edges around here are clean, because we don't want to have to go and scrape away material if we don't have to when we're done. All right, got a line this time. So I'm lining that up. And I'm going to push it really hard. And you can, if it'll stay, you can just leave it like this for a few minutes. If it will hang there, and if it does hang there, that's a very good indication you're going to have a good bond. And just let it sit there a second. Okay. All right, so there we have our lion. Now, I have some excess around here that we don't really want. And it pulled away a little up here, and that's because it wasn't dry, but I did have some cement in this. I probably should have taken it outside and rinsed it thoroughly before I put the mortar back in, you know, when we had the mess up on the first one. So it wanted to pull away a little up here. If I had cleaned this mold, rinsed this mold off before I put in a second batch, we wouldn't have had that happen. And I'm just taking my little artist palette knife here, and I'm just cleaning up around the edges. And I'm actually using the edge of it to cut away the excess. You know, I put a little more up here to fill up any gap because that was sloping away. And that worked out well. I've got a nice, it makes contact all the way around. If you're doing this on an outside feature, you absolutely can, but you want to make sure up here, especially along the top, that everywhere you apply this makes full contact with the cement behind it, because that will be the ideal place for rain to run down, freeze and thaw, and then eventually part of this will pop off. But if you keep that sealed around the top, you don't have to worry about that. So why am I having to cut away material? I had a little bit too much in the center of the back of the mold, but there's good and bad to that. This way I've got extra that I can push to close up the seams, like right there. And that is pretty much it. I'm going to let this sit for a minute, and when this has started to lighten and turn gray, a lighter gray, I'll take a brush around the edges and get any loose cement. But that's really all there is to it. And that would have been done in about 5 minutes if I hadn't forgot to mark the center of this misshapen form. And there you go. And that is how we carved a lion's head into our fireplace stones. So in addition to making these silicone cornstarch molds, also sometimes called ugu molds, we can use them not just for concrete, but we can use them with plaster of Paris, with epoxy, with wood putty, and we can make ornamentation for woodworking, for walls, for furniture, for doors, just all kinds of things, and we will play with that. In the meantime, it is spring. I am loving it, and that means we get to do projects both outside and in, and you get to be here for all of it. In fact, I'm sitting here looking, everything needs to be scrubbed. So that will be that was going to be my first springtime chore. So videos come out every Saturday, and I hope you join us next week. Until then, be curious, be creative, and always, always, always be kind. Bye-bye.